threatening to block the opening of a new bridge linking Windsor, Ontario and Detroit, Michigan. It's the Gordie Howe Bridge that's supposed to open later this year.
The opening of the nearly $6.5 billion bridge, funded entirely by Canada, is under threat tonight. Donald Trump declaring on social media he will try to block the opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge.
The Gordie Howe Bridge will connect Windsor, Ontario and Detroit, and it's set to open this year. But Trump is threatening to block it, claiming the bridge was built with no American materials.
It started with a single post. No press conference, no policy paper, just a few words on social media. And suddenly one of the most important trade routes in North America was on the brink of chaos. Late one evening, Donald Trump warned that he might block the opening of a massive new bridge connecting Windsor and Detroit. The bridge, nearly finished, fully funded, and years in the making, was suddenly framed as unfair, hostile, and unacceptable to American interests. The bridge in question is the Gordie Howe International Bridge, a 6-lane megastructure scheduled to open later this year. Its price tag, roughly $6.5 billion. And here's the part that immediately set off alarms. Canada paid for the entire thing. Within hours of Trump's post, what had once been a quiet infrastructure success story exploded into a political firestorm stretching from Washington to Ottawa to Lansing. Cable news lit up, lawmakers scrambled, trade experts sounded the alarm. And one massive question hung in the air. Was this really about a bridge? Or was the bridge just the excuse? Because this wasn't just any bridge. This crossing handles the backbone of the North American economy. Roughly 25% of all goods traded between the United States and Canada move through the Detroit-Windsor corridor. Auto parts, food, manufacturing components, fuel, everything that keeps factories running and shelves stocked. Shut that down, or even slow it, and the ripple effects hit almost immediately. Trump's claim was blunt. The bridge was built without American materials, and the U.S. deserved compensation before it could open. He suggested Canada owned both sides of the bridge and framed it as yet another example of America being taken advantage of. But there was a problem. The legal record didn't support any of that. The bridge wasn't secretly negotiated. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't hidden in fine print. In fact, the deal behind it was signed more than a decade ago, openly debated, and approved by both countries through formal channels. Back in 2012, Canada and the state of Michigan reached a unique agreement. Canada would front the entire cost of construction, the bridge, customs plazas, highway connections, everything. Michigan wouldn't pay $1 up front. In exchange, Michigan would receive 50% ownership of the finished bridge and half of all net toll revenue once Canada recovered its investment. It was signed by Michigan's Republican governor at the time, Rick Snyder. And it didn't stop there. In 2013, the United States Department of State issued the required presidential permit. Construction was officially approved at the federal level. In 2017, Trump himself, alongside Justin Trudeau, called the bridge a vital economic link between the two countries. In 2019, Trump signed legislation that included U.S. customs funding directly tied to the project. This wasn't some rogue Canadian build. It had American approval at every step, which made Trump's sudden threat in February 2026 feel less like a policy correction and more like a political grenade. Almost immediately, people inside Michigan began pushing back. Rick Snyder publicly corrected the president point by point, reminding Americans that Michigan negotiated the deal precisely to protect its long-term interests without spending billions up front. Blocking the bridge now, he warned, wouldn't punish Canada. It would punish Michigan. And that message echoed across party lines. Democratic Senator Elissa Slotkin warned that delaying the bridge would disrupt supply chains and raise prices for consumers. Governor Gretchen Whitmer, who had worked with Trump before, issued a carefully worded but firm statement emphasizing jobs, auto manufacturing, and bipartisan cooperation. Even Michigan House Speaker Matt Hall, while defending Trump's broader trade stance, acknowledged that retaliation from Canada could hit American business owners, especially those tied to the existing bridge. And that's where the story takes a turn, because there's already a bridge between Detroit and Windsor, and it's owned by a single private family. the century-old bridge that quietly controlled North American trade, and the powerful interests that stood to lose everything if competition finally arrived. The monopoly. Nobody talks about for nearly 100 years, one structure has quietly dominated commercial traffic between the United States and Canada. The Ambassador Bridge, built in 1929, has long been the primary route for heavy truck traffic between Detroit and Windsor. Because the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel does not allow commercial trucks, nearly every 18-wheeler crossing this corridor has had only one option. That bridge is privately owned by the Moran family, who acquired it in 1979. For decades, that monopoly generated over $60 million a year in toll revenue. No competition, no alternative route, no pressure to modernize. So when plans for a second publicly owned bridge began gaining traction, the response was fierce. The Maroon family fought it at every level. They spent roughly $30 million backing a Michigan ballot initiative that would have required statewide voter approval for any new international bridge. Voters rejected it by nearly 60%. They filed lawsuits claiming exclusive rights to any Detroit-Windsor crossing. They lost repeatedly. Even the U.S. Supreme Court declined to hear their final appeal. During Trump's first term, ads aired on Fox News urging him to kill the Gordie Howe project. And yet, despite the pressure, the project moved forward, which is why Trump's 2026 threat raised eyebrows. Because if the new bridge were delayed or blocked, one group would benefit immediately: the private owners of the Ambassador Bridge. Suddenly, the narrative of protecting American interests looked more complicated, because preserving a private monopoly isn't the same thing as protecting American workers, manufacturers, or consumers. And that complexity exploded when Democrats noticed the timing. On the same day Trump posted his threat, U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick reportedly met with Matthew Maroon. Hours later, the bridge became leverage. That coincidence triggered an investigation led by Robert Garcia, the top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee. Lawmakers demanded records, emails, meeting notes, any communication between the administration and the bridge's private owner. The question was blunt: were wealthy donors influencing foreign and economic policy behind closed doors? The administration denied any connection, but optics matter in politics, and this one looked bad. Meanwhile, the economic reality couldn't be ignored. The Detroit-Windsor corridor handles a quarter of all U.S.-Canada trade. The auto industry alone depends on parts crossing the border multiple times before a car is finished. Delays don't just slow trucks, they shut down factories. The existing Ambassador Bridge funnels trucks through city streets on the Canadian side, forcing them through traffic lights and congestion. The Gordie Howe Bridge, by contrast, offers a freeway-to-freeway connection, straight from Ontario's Highway 401 to Interstate 75. A study from the University of Windsor estimated the new bridge could cut up to 20 minutes per trip. Over 30 years, that translates to $2.3 billion in savings, and that's before accounting for redundancy. With only one truck-capable bridge, any accident, protest, or mechanical failure can freeze cross-border commerce instantly. A second crossing isn't a luxury, it's insurance, which is why leaders in Michigan weren't buying the political theatrics. The trade war beneath the bridge, China, tariffs, alcohol bans, and why this fight suddenly turned international. The trade war under the concrete. If this were just about steel and tolls, the fight would have ended quickly. But it wasn't. Behind Trump's bridge threat sat a much larger geopolitical battle. Canada had recently struck a new trade agreement with China under Prime Minister Mark Carney. The deal slashed Chinese tariffs on Canadian canola from 85% to 15%, unlocking an estimated $7 billion in new exports. Washington was furious. At the same time, Ontario had banned American alcohol sales in provincial stores, another sore spot for U.S. trade officials. Suddenly, the bridge became leverage, a way to apply pressure without firing a single tariff. But there was a problem with that strategy. The facts didn't move. Canada didn't own both sides of the bridge. Michigan retained 50% ownership. American steel was used. American workers were hired. The agreement was public and unchanged. Carney responded calmly. He called Trump directly and laid out 4 simple facts. Canada financed the bridge. Ownership is shared. American materials were used. Workers from both countries built it. Then he did something unexpected. He didn't escalate. Speaking later on Parliament Hill, Carney framed the bridge as cooperation, not conflict. He even joked about Canada's women's hockey team playing the U.S. that day. A subtle signal of confidence. The White House doubled down anyway, issuing a statement claiming Canada's ownership was unacceptable. Michigan officials corrected them again because paperwork matters, and the paperwork was clear. The ticking financial clock, the cost of delay, and why, no matter the politics, this bridge is almost impossible to stop. The clock is ticking. By early 2026. Construction on the Gordie Howe International Bridge was essentially complete. What remained was timing. And time, it turns out, is expensive. A report from Anderson Economic Group estimated that every week of delay could cost up to $7 million in lost revenue. $5 million from operations, $2 million from customs and plaza activity, millions more in interest, maintenance, and legal costs. Because Canada financed the project up front, much of the burden would fall on Canadian lenders and taxpayers, but not all of it. Michigan owns half the bridge, which means American taxpayers would feel the pain too. The deeper risk, though, isn't weekly losses. It's supply chains. Auto manufacturing runs on tight schedules. A missed shipment can shut down a plant. Agricultural producers rely on predictable crossings. Tourism, logistics, and freight all depend on flow. That's why, despite the noise, experts believe the bridge will open. Contracts are signed, permits issued, ownership locked. Political drama may dominate headlines, but infrastructure runs on paper, not posts. When the bridge opens, roughly 8,000 trucks per day will cross it. About 6,000 Canadians will commute daily to jobs in Detroit. Toll revenue will flow exactly as negotiated. And for the first time in nearly a century, the private monopoly over heavy truck traffic across the Detroit River will face real competition. Trump's threat turned a bridge into a flashpoint, but the foundation never moved. If a single social media post can shake a $6.5 billion project, imagine what's at stake when politics collides with infrastructure. Comment below. Was this about trade or about power?